This is Duke University.
So let's introduce our three alumni. I'm going to start with Victoria Nneji. She is a PhD grad from Duke, a scientist, technologist, engineer, mathematician. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Applied Mathematics, as well as a minor in Entrepreneurship and Innovation from Columbia University. And she got her PhD here at Duke in robotics. And she did some amazing autonomous transportation systems engineering work. That's how I originally met her a few years ago. She immigrated to the US from Nigeria as a child, and she developed caregiving skills to support her family. And so that's what led her to found AKALAKA, a platform providing caring for family and friends with home and community-based services. So welcome, Victoria. We also have Quinci King, who is a 2020 graduate of Duke, undergrad, and has a range of experience in operations, strategy, entrepreneurship, and social impact. He is currently a senior business operations manager on the corporate development team and business operations team at BetterUp, where he drives strategic initiatives and global processes in the office of the CEO. Before joining BetterUp, Quinci founded Audacity Labs, which is a nonprofit organization that raised funds to help youth and adults in North Carolina explore careers in technology, media, and entrepreneurship. He also previously worked with McKinsey as a consultant. So he holds a BA in public policy and a certificate in innovation and entrepreneurship from Duke. Thank you, Quinci, for that. Would love to see that certificate. That is awesome. So welcome, Quinci. And then finally, and last but not least, we have Catherine Bhattachar, MBA grad from the class of 21, which she has a background in analytics and management consulting with Wayfair and LEK Consulting. While at Duke, she focused on strategy and entrepreneurship and working with numerous North Carolina-based startups while she was here. She completed her MBA, then she joined a company called Tiny Earth Toys as one of the company's first employees, initially leading customer support and product. And she's now evolved her role to incorporate operational and strategic work. And she's now the company's chief operating officer. And as of a couple weeks ago, now a co-founder of the company. So congratulations, Catherine, and welcome. All right. So thank you all for being here. I'm excited to kind of give you all a chance to share some of your hard-earned wisdom with our students and alumni here tonight. So the plan for everyone tonight is that I'm going to ask a handful of questions, and we'll just get those started. If you've got a question that you want to ask all three of these amazing alumni, you can go ahead and put that in the chat, and if we have time, we'll get to that. All right. So Victoria, Quinci, Catherine, let's go ahead and get started. And let's just start with this like big question that I think is kind of the thesis behind this session, which is, what do you wish you had known about startups during your time at Duke before you got as involved as you are right now?
I guess I can start.
Quinci, go ahead. You got it.
Nice to meet you all, and thank you for having me. So yeah, I would say a little bit of context on my experience with entrepreneurship at Duke was I started my program as an after-school program partnering with Duke INE and the North Carolina Museum of Life and Science. And so I did that from sophomore year and then continued to do that full time a little bit after I graduated until January of 2021. So with that said, I think a lot of my learnings were just very early on trying to build a really good kind of support network, tapping into a lot of the resources that Duke already has available to offer. And so by that, it was kind of like the Duke Law Clinic that was offering different support for incorporating, and they kind of walked us through the entire process, helped us set up all of our tax forms and stuff, and just gave us general guidance, leveraging the Duke INE network and tapping into all the alumni, which were pretty pivotal in kind of building our initial workforce of mentors that were partnering with us to support students in the school district. And then also weaving in support from DSG, things like Durham and Regional Affairs out in the community, and just kind of taking all of the areas that Duke already has an abundance of resources and figuring out how to kind of centralize it and harness it to whatever your needs are, but then also bringing in partners where they also kind of see synergies. And so I think realizing that a lot of the times you don't want to recreate the wheel, it's kind of figuring out what the landscape already looks like and seeing how you can build bridges to hopefully create whatever impact you're trying to make.
I love it. Taking advantage of all those resources available. I love it. What about you, Catherine? Go ahead.
Yeah, unlike an in-person panel where you can kind of feel the who's going to talk next, it's a little harder, but I'll give it a shot. So a little more about Tiny Earth Toys. When I joined a few years ago, we were a toy rental subscription business, and we're in the process of pivoting to launch a new toy product. But all of that to say, it's e-commerce, it's toy industry, it's circular economy, renting toys, returning them, shipping them again. What I wish I knew about startups during my time at Duke, I wish I knew how to do all the jobs I've needed to do in a startup, but like that's the whole fun of it, is learning how to do all of these different things that you need to do because you're inventing a new kind of wheel. And then I wish I'd known how funding would change for startups. When I was at Duke, in 2021, there was a lot of money for startups, and now it's a lot tighter. So it's there's not as many jobs, more companies are failing. So it's just something that I would want to be aware of, the macro environment. And then I wish I knew how much fun and worthwhile it is to work in a startup. I thought that it would be, and I hoped it would be. And so I explored startups during my time at Duke through founding my own thing, working through a class, one of the new ventures classes. And then I explored it by working with a grant giving organization, NC IDEA. And I enjoyed that, working with local startups. But I couldn't really tell until I actually tried it and joined a startup how much fun it was.
You mentioned some of the crazy jobs that you sometimes have to do. What's been the craziest job that you've had to do as in your role as an early employee? And if anybody else has a crazy one, I'd love to hear that too.
Cleaning toys, packing them up and shipping them when there are a lot of orders.
Yeah.
How to negotiating shipping rates, and those are and then there's everything to how to conduct a layoff.
Yeah. These are things that they don't necessarily teach you in school, right? No, you can only learn by doing. What about you, Victoria? What did you wish you knew about startups prior to while you were at Duke?
Okay. Well, I'll also pull from my experience when I was in New York for college.
Sure.
I think one thing that first came to mind when I thought about your question is that I think with startups, it's really about kind of for me to take the initiative as someone who wants to work with the company of reaching out. So even if a company doesn't have like a job posting online, just finding a way in, if I am interested, to be able to reach out to even like the founder of the company, realizing that when a company is relatively new or small, people in those positions are pretty accessible compared to like at a larger company. And sometimes even if a job description hasn't been created, just having that conversation, they might just create an opportunity for you to work with them. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I learned early on in my journey is just sometimes jobs can be created for you if you just take initiative. Yeah. I
love that. That is a really great lesson to pick up, because I think that's 100% true. And I'm sure, Catherine, in a very early stage, Quinci, you're in a little bit later stage, but I imagine that might also be the case as well sometimes, that organizations kind of are looking for folks that can solve problems for them. And if, organizations always have problems. And so how can you kind of position yourself in the place so that you can be solving those problems? Any thoughts on that, Catherine or Quinci?
Yeah, so I can speak to that with my experience right now. So currently I work as a senior biz ops manager at a company called BetterUp. And so just for context on like the role of business operations, usually at tech companies, it's pretty much similar to like an internal consulting role. So a lot of people that kind of come into that are usually former management consultants. So more of like the generalist skill set, they're going to put you into anything that they need that doesn't have headcount against it and kind of throw you out to figure it out, and then you come back and see if it worked or not. So with that said, I think there is a lot of autonomy, especially in the tech world today. I think most of the job openings that I've seen recently are kind of looking for someone that is able to kind of carve out their own work stream and build their own leverage in the company in the way that they kind of see fit, or in the way that they want to create impact. So I think for me, one example was a project I did recently, which was helping us kind of separate out our professional services arm of the business. And so with that, it was just two of us in the beginning, just kind of bootstrapping it all, trying to figure it all out, not really a lot of resources. So even when you're in a large tech company, I think we were at like 650 employees or something in Series E, you still have a lot of space to be an entrepreneur and try to figure out different ways to even optimize systems, create better customer experiences, or whatever that might be. And those can be successful or not, but a lot of the times the leader just kind of want to see that you're willing to bear yourself against it and figure out how to get it done.
Love it. Love it. Catherine, you
Yeah,
got a thought there?
I totally agree that being a go-getter type, like creating your own role in projects based on the needs, is how a lot of jobs at startups get created. For me, it was like that, where I was talking to the founder about what she was working on and discussing it with her, and then we discussed like what the gaps were, and I helped write my own job description, and then as my role evolved, wrote different job descriptions. So it's definitely can be a collaborative thing. Love the call out from Victoria that even if there isn't a job posting, there could be a job.
Love it, love it. Well, while we're thinking about jobs in this kind of vein, let's maybe talk a little bit about money and equity. And so, certainly some people think about equity as kind of one reason to work at a small company. And so we don't necessarily need to get into specifics of any equity or cash or anything like that, but I guess maybe just think about the process that you use to evaluate kind of the thought either to start your own company or to go in early at a company. Again, Quincy's is a little bit farther along. I'm just curious, kind of, how did you think about that, and how did you go through that process of evaluation? If there's any negotiation, anything like that that you might share with students that could be beneficial.
Can start. So earlier stage companies will often give you more equity and less salary, and later stage companies will often give you less equity and higher salary. And there can be room to negotiate between salary and equity within that. Like, you can be like, hey, just so you know, my priority is salary over equity. And that's what I started with, even though Tiny Earth is an early stage company, because I didn't want additional risk. But so that's how I thought about it. But I wouldn't think of, at least for an early stage company, I wouldn't think of equity as a like huge motivate. For me, it wasn't a huge motivator because there's a small likelihood of success. Most startups fail. And so, especially early stage ones. So I thought of equity as a nice bonus someday, maybe, if it ever worked out, but not as something that would translate to money likely.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a solid strategy to kind of think about it. What about you, Quincy or Victoria? How did you think about equity and salary? Certainly as it relates to starting your own business as well, Victoria as well. That's a factor as well.
Yeah. I saw you come off at the same time.
You can go ahead first.
Okay. So I think Catherine, covered like the basics around just like how equity usually works as you move up the stages of maturity in a company. And so I came into my company when it just raised a Series E, I think the year prior, which is usually going to be around the point where after there's not really going to be a lot of large raises unless you're IPOing. So at that point, it's more around the experience that I was seeking of like being in a high growth tech company pre-IPO, taking it to IPO. And I think to Catherine's point, making sure that your basic needs are met with your salary. So like you should never, unless you really believe this is like a unicorn, and earlier stage, especially more so, make sure that you have like the necessities covered and that you're going to be happy with just like being content, even if this fails entirely, that the salary is at least like giving you the lifestyle that you want. But I think, yeah, you're definitely going to want to prioritize equity if you think you believe in the mission and the company. So for me, when I came in, I was leaving McKinsey, and there's a lot of other companies you can go to that are very established in the tech world that will offer you 2-3 times more than what you'll get even at a Series E. But I was like, I'll be fine with X salary, and I would rather us negotiate on equity. And when I said that, they were even more excited to kind of continue to work with me, because I think that also shows a level of commitment when you're going through the hiring process, that you are going to be there more for like the long term. But with that, the kind of reciprocation there was that they actually came above my equity expectations in this negotiation. So very happy about that. But to Catherine's point, we still haven't IPO'd yet, so we'll see if that to what degree that means something. But I think if you believe in it, it's definitely worth it.
Wow, great kind of tactical example there. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, yeah, I also agree that it's kind of depends on the specific stages of a company, and considering like the salary that we earn from companies is based off of how much money they have in the door before they can decide how much they can spend on expenses. So I think kind of doing some initial research to understand the stage a company is at. So if they have raised capital, like how much capital have they raised, and also like how much revenue are they earning from their existing customer base, and what's the projection for that. So it's kind of like as a potential employee, it would be kind of doing analysis almost like you're an investor in a way in the company, and considering like rather than you're investing money per se, you're investing your time, and you're kind of projecting how long you want to stay in this based off of what you know so far. So I think kind of taking that similar approach to make your decision, plus also considering your own personal needs. So whether maybe if you just graduated or you're a few years out of school and you have certain needs for, you know, your living situation, or you don't necessarily have like a savings, then considering that as well, like just the reality of things of what really matters for you in terms of you making a living. And perhaps maybe you might develop a good relationship with the company today, but it's not a good fit for you today. I think that's okay to say no to something today, because the opportunity, and a better opportunity could arise in the future, like when the timing works with your life. So I think just kind of considering your personal situation as well as like the company situation, and whether or not you're willing to kind of make that investment of your time based off of what you're committing to. And I think for me, like starting AKALAKA at the stage that we're currently at, I decided not to fundraise like from investors early on, but rather to have a business model where we have revenue. And so far, we actually don't have any employees. This year, we're starting to have contractors. And my goal is like to have sustainable revenue such that I can kind of have a runway where I can commit to a salary for employees and the benefits that come with it. And so we're kind of taking this approach with how we're building the company. And I think when I consider people to work with us, I'm honest with them about kind of our plans and the progress we've made, and then kind of what they would be committing to. And many people have already been working with us without just as volunteering as I am. And so I think when people have that commitment, it's because they are able to, because of their life circumstances, but also because they are kind of committing this time, looking forward to like the potential future of the company. So it's a lot of factors to consider. So I just encourage you, like when you are making your decisions, to really ask questions, even if it feels like it can be kind of awkward to ask those questions. I think if they come up to you, then like if those questions come up in your mind, then I think it's worth taking the time to bring it up and ask, and then seeing how the company responds to you, because that could also be an indicator for you in terms of the kind of environment that you'd be joining.
Yeah, I would highlight that what Victoria is doing by funding the company using revenue is bootstrapping, and that if you can accomplish it is amazing, because you have total control over what you're doing, versus venture capital backed companies or often have they need to meet investors interests as well as their own. So like that's a really hard thing to do, and huge kudos to Victoria. And right now we are in the process of laying off all our employees, as I mentioned. The last few are remaining to ship out the remaining toys as we're pivoting. And going forward, my co-founder and I are going to be just us working on the business and hiring contractors to fill in gaps. So taking a similar approach. And what we've done in the past also was hire contractors initially, and then if they were adding a lot of value, then brought them on as an employee. So if that's a potential way to get in the door, is there might not be a full-time role available initially, might start as a contract, and have discussions on the front end of that, like, hey, is this contract a full-time? Is that something that could happen?
Yeah, I really appreciate you being so frank about some of these realities of working startups. Catherine, you just mentioned kind of this hard decision to pivot and having to lay off some staff. I want to maybe talk about this risk question, maybe as kind of the last one before we head to the breakout rooms, which is, think about your loved ones, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a parent, whether it's sister, brother, whatever. When you told them what you wanted to do, I mean, were they like, yay, go for it? Were they nervous? How did you navigate that? Because I do know that this can be perceived as a risky, and it is kind of risky, but at the same time, also in big tech, there are layoffs. So who knows, right? Anyway, let me just stop rambling and give me your thoughts about risk and how you communicated about risk.
Yeah, I will say that in my experience, I think my family is generally supportive of me taking risk, but it's kind of like me taking risk in this scope, but then having like something kind of to balance off that risk, if that makes sense. So like, for example, me starting this company, I'm taking a huge risk with this in terms of like my time and also like creating something that, without really any kind of direction. It's kind of like I have to set the direction for this and not really being sure about, the market and how the market will respond. Like I know the market exists from my own personal experience, but also the research that I did even before deciding to start the company. I interviewed over 100 people during the summer, during a couple of summers ago, just through conversations before I even decided that this was something that I would commit my time to. So I think I was kind of hesitant to do this, but I'm thankful that my family has been supportive of me in this. But I think to balance off this huge risk, I'm actually still kind of doing things in my field of training professionally that's a bit, quote unquote, more stable, like working with bigger companies. And thankfully, I've been able to adjust my time on those efforts, like to be more flexible. So I'm thankful that I have that privilege of adjusting my time at work and still having the balance for new network. But I do think I think that's what's making my family be amenable to this. Because I think if I were to just only do this work and nothing else, then I think it would be very like questionable. I think just from our culture. So I'm an immigrant, and I think it's really important, like in our culture, like to have some to be like in a stable career per se. I think in many cultures it is like, I think it's like of having something that you can kind of, you're working toward kind of rebuilding, especially at the age that I am in. Like I think this is like quote unquote like our most potential productive working years. And so what we're making now, it can go towards savings, and it can be like useful in the future as we're older to be able to have the savings from this year of working. So I think just all of those things kind of factored into my decision making. But my goal, as I mentioned, is to have the business of AKALAKA to be sustainable, such that not just sustainable like small business, but actually sustainable and growing, to show that this is possible with what I'm doing. But it's a daily kind of challenge of trying to balance these different priorities, and also to have a timeline in my plan of like when I will let go of things that are quote unquote more stable, to be able to to only do this work because that's really my passion. So I think it's been a balance, but I think having the privilege of my training and the ability to do other work while doing this, I think it's been helpful.
Cool, thank you. Catherine, Quincy, how did you think about risk?
So the way I thought about it, so joining a seed stage startup 3 years ago, I thought, okay, you know what? There's a good chance that this will fail in the next year. And I thought, okay, would it still be worth it if that happened? And I decided it would be, that the things I would be learning, the opportunity to test something out, test out my interest in startups, work for a founder who I believed in, that it was worth it. And my family and friends were definitely had reservations, and they asked, like, and that's what I told them was, I think it's worth it even if it fails. And I wouldn't choose it another way. It's even if it fails this year, I would say it's been worth it. And because of all of the learning, because you learn a lot faster and your career accelerates a lot usually in a startup, because there's just so much to be done and you're around to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of opportunities to step up. And my family and friends, like, they do still ask, like, some of them are really excited, but some of them still ask, like, so are you going to go get a real job? And that's okay. And I say, like, nope, this is a real job and I'm still loving it. And I think that it could be really great. What I'm doing every day, I'm learning from and enjoying, and it could still work out.
Love it. Quincy, any thoughts on risk and sharing that with family and friends and all that?
Yeah, I think because I started my venture when I was in school as an undergrad, I think that takes away a lot of the kind of other fears. It's like you still have a lot of the protection of like the system and still opportunities to go through recruiting and stuff while you're going through your schooling. And so I think I got really lucky, and I think I had also come from a family of people that had pursued entrepreneurship in their own ways. And so I think just having that background was a huge privilege and help as I navigated the space. And so luckily it wasn't as big of a thing for me, but the whole reason that we started the organization that we did is because a lot of people don't have that. And even just like the framing around, as you said, like entrepreneurship as a viable pursuit to even build like a living wage is not something that a lot of people have. So I don't think that the risk should be disregarded by any means. And I can see why a lot of people have to kind of go through those challenges internally to figure out if that's the right thing for them or even get their family to support them. But hopefully you do find that support system, because it is a pursuit worth doing.
For sure, for sure.